Okay, so there's that. And then we're going to start the webinar and start letting people into the room. So, yay, people are coming in the room. People are starting to show up. And I know I've said this, I think, Alice, I'm not sure, I think I've said it at your event, Kristin, or I said it at yours, Alice, that I always envision starting these webinars like flinging the doors open at Warwick's and like letting people pile in, because it's like when you see the numbers on the participants starting to like create, it's like, oh, people are showing up.
We're really there next time.
Yeah, exactly. Next time, because we were talking in the green room, Alice, it's 2 years. This is our second time launching doing a virtual event with you. Time for you to come back to San Diego.
Really? Wow.
I was here last year around this time virtually because we couldn't do it live.
Yeah. And we thought, earlier in the year, we were thinking, oh, October, we'll be doing real stuff in the fall. And it's just like, and that variant kind of hit and we all kind of went, maybe not.
Yeah,
it's not such a good idea.
I think I was one of the first too, Julie, because
Yes, because you were right in like, what was it?
February.
Yeah.
February,
20. Yeah. So it was, we've learned, I've learned a lot in this. I am like a tech guru now, ladies.
Not me.
so as people are getting, we've got everybody kind of settling in. We got some good people showing up with us. So just real quick, I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping while we're letting them all settle in. Tonight, okay, first of all, we are on launch day. I told them in the green room that I won the lotto on having launch day with Alice and Kristin. Does it get any better than this? I mean, my goodness. No, it does not. I will answer my own question. So for everybody that's joining in, I'm assuming you know who Warwick's is, but in case you don't, we're located in San Diego, La Jolla. We're a little town right above San Diego. My little sign there says 1896. So we might not be as old as the Owens. But we've survived 125 years, 2 pandemics, a couple world wars. Anyways, so we're celebrating our 125th anniversary this year. Yeah. So November, we're going to have a celebration at the store. So if anybody's in San Diego, we'll be sending out some notification about that and going to run some fun contests and you can win some prizes. Most of you that are here tonight have purchased the book, but if you haven't, I'm going to pop that link into the comment section. Kristin and Alice are going to talk for about 30 minutes, and then we're going to do some questions from you all. And so I see somebody has already put some questions into the Q&A. So you see, if you scroll over your screen, you're going to see that Q&A button to add your questions in there. And I'll bring those in when they're done chatting a little bit. If you're here, you both, you know these two wonderful women. They are multi-New York Times bestselling authors. Alice, I think you have what, over 30 books published? Yeah. And Kristin, over 20? Yeah. So beloved at Warwick's, you both are. We host you as often and as much as we can, whenever we can. We adore both of you. And so with that, I'm going to turn the stage over to you two to have a great conversation. I'll come back in with some questions in a little bit.
All right.
Thanks, Julie.
Great.
We love
Thanks, Julie. Yes. Alice.
Thanks for being with me tonight. I'm so glad to be here with you.
I am just, I'm so thrilled. And I was thinking as I was getting ready for this, the last time we saw each other, actually when we met, we were essentially sitting on a beach in Hawaii having Mai Tais and pina coladas. And it just seems like a wildly different world now.
It really seems like a different world. I'm so glad we got to do that then.
I know it was such, it was such an honor to meet you. You've been such an inspiration throughout my career, I think, for so many writers and especially women writers who write about women. I mean, I think you've really been a trailblazer in that. And that, of course, leads to this beautiful, gorgeous book of magic, which, oh my gosh, it's fabulous, beautiful, wonderful. And I have so many questions for you. So I'm just going to dive in.
But before you start asking me questions, I have to just say that Firefly Lane, the TV show, got me through part of the COVID experience. I just loved it. It was so wonderful. And I thought so in the spirit of your book and just loved it. So I felt like I've seen you because I've been watching the show.
Well, thank you. That was actually a pretty fun little snippet during all of this for me as well. It was, and you know about this, but for me, it was the first time seeing my creation sort of come to life on the screen, and that is such a surreal thing. So maybe we can talk about that a little later. But what I'm really interested in, and especially as a writer, but as a reader too, I mean, I remember reading Practical Magic and just being, blown away by it. And I guess as I follow these books through and get to this one, which is this beautiful, not only wrapping up, but delving in of the characters that you've been building in this world that you've been building. So I just have to know if you knew when you wrote Practical Magic that the story was this big and that you would follow it sort of in both directions.
I had no idea, none whatsoever. I never thought I would write about these characters again. And if I had thought that I was going to, then I would have plotted it out. I would have made kind of an outline or Bible where I would have known what I was doing, but I kind of went into it not knowing. I really did it because I heard from readers who kept saying, we think there's more to the story. We want a sequel. And, for years and years. And then I started to think, I don't know about a sequel, but I think I want to write a prequel. And so the first thing I did was write Rules of Magic 25 years later, which took place in the 60s in New York City, which was my time, my favorite place. And then I went back again to the 17th century to kind of the origin story of the family. But, I set up kind of this challenge for myself because I had to be true to the initial book, yet I felt like I really wanted to change some things. So it was really a balancing act to do that. And then finally wrote the Book of Magic, which I think is kind of like closure for the family, for me, for readers. I just think it's a book that I kind of needed to write to be able to say goodbye to these characters that I'd spent over 25 years with.
So it was 25 years between the first and the second, but then fairly quickly for the three, right? So
quickly.
Did you know that going in when you were? No,
I had no plans, nothing at all. I just went into it, and then no plans. I mean, I don't advise doing it because I think it makes things difficult. But once I went back into the world, I realized that my readers were right, and there was so much material, and I could write in so much of a bigger way if I wrote 4 books. I mean, I didn't know there before, but it just seemed like such a bigger canvas. I could, write about characters that would be considered minor characters in some book, became major characters, and it was really fun for me to escape into that world.
I mean, that is just fascinating to me because what I want to say to everyone in the room is that is so hard. I mean, I wrote a sequel to Firefly Lane 10 years later, and I wanted to quit every single day because I was constantly coming up some sentence that I'd thrown out before that now hamstrung me. So I just find that remarkable that you were able, not only to come back and to expand, but to inhabit so fully. Like when I opened this book and I read, the first scene or whatever, there's just this moment in your books where you tumble in. I mean, the way you bring us in through language, through imagery, through emotion, you use all of these beautiful tools to create your world instantly. And it just felt like this wonderful homecoming. And I'm sure that is exactly what your readers want from this final book.
Well, I hope they feel that way because, usually, I don't know how it is for you, but I don't really think about readers when I'm writing a book. I'm just really writing for myself. This time I had to think about readers because there were certain expectations. I knew that people really loved these characters, especially Vincent. And I thought, I don't want to disappoint people. I have never felt like that before. Did you feel like that when you wrote the sequel?
You know, I'm like you. I really don't think of my readers. I sort of have this blind faith that they are my readers because they share my worldview, and I hope that they follow me along. And I think if I thought of them, I would be hamstrung.
Me
Because
too.
because
Yeah.
you make some bold choices, I think, in this book, and I think there's a lot of things that are what people want, that are what people are looking for and waiting for. But you're also, of course, breaking expectation and surprising people and taking the story in places that maybe they don't expect. So that's a pretty high wire balancing act.
But you're right. I mean, you want to fulfill expectations, but you also want you want someone to turn the page and think, oh
Right.
my gosh, I didn't expect this. And you want to do that as a writer too. I mean, that's the fun of writing, is to think you know, but you don't exactly know, and the characters surprise you. And that's part of the pleasure of writing, I think, just the same as it is for reading, to feel like you want to turn the page. And I always feel like, and I especially felt it with these characters, but I always feel, like when somebody says, well, who do you envision playing these characters? If there was going to be a movie,
Yeah.
I don't see them. I don't envision them as anyone. You probably don't either.
I don't either. I never know what their eye color is, what their hair, unless there's some specific reason. I'm constantly just saying, I'll fix that at the end and sort of make it all together, because I'm trying to just follow the story. And like you said, surprise myself. And one of the things, like, my process has changed over the years. In the beginning, I was very structured and organized and disciplined, and I knew everything. And I realized over time that my novels were better if I did all that legwork, but I still allowed the story to sort of unfurl on its own somehow and surprise me along the way. What is your process like?
I mean, it's totally that. I make an outline. I feel like I make an outline plot wise. It never stays the same because the characters start to make decisions. And then I kind of like build the world. I do a lot with
Right.
I used to do it with poster boards and different magic markers. I still do that sometimes, where I have like a list of the plants and a list of the animals, and I just literally building the world that the characters can walk into. But like you, I feel like I think I know, but then they surprise me. And I think that's when characters are really coming alive and they start to make their own decisions in a way, and you just follow them along. And that's kind of like the excitement of it, really, once it gets to that point.
I wonder how much of that is just sort of growth and maturity and coming into your own as an artist, and sort of allowing yourself to trust yourself that you'll know if you're going wrong and you'll pull back in a way, because when you're beginning, there's so much to learn. And now, you're obviously so comfortable with just what a novel is.
Well, I think, when I think about myself writing a novel, because my first novel, I think I wrote it in graduate school. It was published, I think, when I was 23. I was really brave. And I certainly never thought about getting published, or, things were kind of different. And I was just writing the book to write the book. I got very little money. I think, 35 people read it. And, I just felt like very brave, because there wasn't that much at stake, because things were just different then. And I think it's much harder right now for people starting out right now. I mean, we're lucky because we're established, but I think for young writers that I know, I think it's really tough right now because there's so much thought about publishing.
Yeah.
It almost overwhelms the writing part of it, So I think that's really tough.
I think it is. And I think one of the things that's difficult, sort of going back to what we were saying earlier, in terms of when you're writing a novel, when you're like this one. So this book feels like it's about so many things, I mean, obviously it's about love and the price of love, the sacrifice of love, the difficulty of love. But it feels to me like it's equally about acceptance, and accepting other people, accepting yourself, accepting your own heritage, following your own heritage, and sort of all of the accommodations that people make along the way,
Uh,
both in furtherance of what's expected of them and, kind of keeping away from that. And I just found that this idea of acceptance in this book feels so timely and so important in the world the way it is right now. Was that a theme that you went looking for? Did you want to say it before, or did it just arise from the characters?
And that's an interesting question. I think it just arises, but I think the more you write, the older you are, the more you realize that you have a theme throughout all of your books. And for me, I have two, I think. One is survival and survivorship, whether I'm writing about the Holocaust or whether I'm writing about witches. It's about survivorship. I'm a breast cancer survivor of 25 or 26 years, maybe it's 28, I don't know. And I think that it really influenced me. But even before that, I think how people manage to survive in a world that can be so cruel and still see it as beautiful and still want to live is always kind of astounding to me. But the other thing I think is that I think I'm trying to give women who didn't have their own voice and couldn't tell their own stories, I'm trying to tell their stories. And I always felt like that was what fairy tales were about. Because fairy tales have something like, I think it's something, I don't remember the exact percentage, but something like 85% of the heroes in fairy tales are girls.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why, as a child reader, they really appealed to me because I felt, kind of helpless in my own life. And to read fairy tales where girls were the ones who made things happen, who rescued themselves, who rescued other people, was really important to me. And I think it really affects, everything that I write.
That is fascinating. I've never made that connection before, but you're absolutely right. And, one of the things that's so powerful in this book is really sort of women taking charge of their lives, and their destiny. And, in your world, it's dealing with a curse and, how you go back in time and how you sort of fight for what it is you want when it's not wholly within your control, and how you do that as a woman. But it really goes through all the women, regardless of what they're doing or where they are in time. And it feels, I don't know, I guess I feel like as a reader, it's so important for me to read novels where women are the heroes, the superheroes, the protagonists, the makers of magic. And I think that's probably one of the reasons that these books are so beloved.
Well, thank you. But yeah, thank you so much. I just thinking, just in talking about this, when I was growing up, in school, we didn't read anything by women. The first thing that I read in school was the Diary of Anne Frank's Diary. And that was the first time I really heard, a young girl's voice. And, I think things have changed, now, hopefully they've changed, but I still remember that and feel that. And, when the movie version of Practical Magic came out, it was really, the critics just, hated it. And I think, and it's become more popular every year. I mean, every year, it's really kind of a cult movie. And I think one of the reasons they hated it, and also one of the reasons it's so popular, is that there are so many women in it. It's about sisterhood. It's about friendship. It's about mothers and daughters. It's about things that you don't, or you used to not see in Hollywood movies. I think you do see that more and more, and you do see it more and more in TV shows. But I think it was, it was something that was kind of new and not valued. Women's stories were not valued, and I hopefully that's changing.
And, it's interesting because I think you and I talked about this in Hawaii too, that I believe that's all true. I believe that, women's stories are definitely sort of seeing this surge right now across all formats of fiction. But we still, I think, we have trouble with reviewers. We have trouble with reviewers who choose to value stories about women, especially if they're anchored in women's emotional lives and their interior landscapes. It's one of those things where it's just, it still isn't sort of seen as of value in the way that other stories are.
I think that's so true. You know, I wrote a book called The Dove Keepers, which is about Masada and the siege of Masada. And it was really interesting to me because I wrote it when I wrote it because I went to Masada and I didn't realize there had been women there. And it was about a band of Jews that held up the Roman army during the destruction of Jerusalem. And then I saw a plaque there that said there had been survivors, which is something I had never known. And I thought, oh, it's a book, you know, as soon as I saw that. But when I went back like years later and was with the director of Masada, he said to me, and this was really valuable to me. He said, you know, never really thought about the women who were up here. Even though the archaeological items are in the museum, you know, the
Really?
homes, the shoes, the hair. And I think that's true for a lot of people, you know, like, you know, we are a large percentage of the world, but, you know, our stories have not been valued. I think it's changing. And I think so many women are writing and speaking up and telling stories and telling the stories of forgotten women also.
Right.
You know, I think, you know, we both feel like we want to do that. And, you know, for me, I feel really good about that. And I feel that's what I want to read and that's what I want to write.
And I think it's what we want to pass on to our daughters, our granddaughters, and, you know, other young women, because, you know, it changes what you believe is possible for you when you see what is possible, you know, for others. Okay, so now my next question. One of the things I loved most about Book of Magic is this is a book that is absolutely in love with libraries and books and stories. And I mean, the Invisible Library. I mean, there's all of these just great little wonderful bits about that. And I can tell from reading this that not only were you and I deeply influenced by all the same books growing up, but that it's such a part of you that it imprints, I think, on your characters. And so talk a little bit about that, because I think so many readers feel that way. We're carrying these characters around in our heads all the time.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's an interesting question because the book starts in a library and there's a library in London visit. And then there's another library in a small town in Essex. And there's also the Athenaeum in Boston, which is a library I belong to, which is a great library. I mean, for me, I feel like books saved my life and libraries saved my life. And that you know, I don't know what would have happened to me without them. And that, you know, I just feel like I wouldn't have known that there was another possibility or another world if not for libraries and for books. And I had a great school librarian, you know, a lot of people had the same story, who let me take out as many books as I wanted to and keep them as long as I wanted to. And then there was a public library in the next town over in Malvern where the librarians let me have a library card, even though I didn't live in the town. And I just felt like I had a choice. I had choice for the first time. I could do whatever I wanted to. I could read whatever I wanted to. I mean, I have to say that, you know, my mother had books and a bookshelf, which was I didn't know anyone else in my neighborhood who had that in their house. And that my father, when he left us, left a box of books in the basement. And in that box of books was pretty much my favorite writer, which is Ray Bradbury. And I think I read him when I was about 12. And I think, you know, what you were saying about being the books you read imprinting on you, I feel like especially when you're 12 or 13, the books you read then are so important to forming how you see the world. And I almost feel like, especially for Ray Bradbury, who's such a moral writer, I mean, there is good and there is evil. And, you know, you have to make choices. I feel like he completely changed my life as, you know, both a person, a reader and a writer. I always feel influenced in some way by him and by the other writers that I loved. So in the book, I mention a lot of these books that were really formative books for me. And then I have a list of these beautiful books.
Which, by the way, for anyone in the audience, it's a great list of books. If you haven't read all of them that are listed in the end, you definitely should. So that just made me think, did that feeling that you had as a young adult reading, did that influence at all your choice to write young adult fiction?
It did. It really did. You know, I felt like, well, I felt like I was writing for the girl that I used to be in a way. And one of my books, I wrote a book called Green Angel, which I wrote right after 9/11, because having not believed in writer's block, I finally had it after 9/11. And I felt like, what's the point of writing, or what's the point of anything? Which I think I could feel now again if I allowed myself to. And then I thought about Ray Bradbury's book, Fahrenheit 451, which is, you know, which is a society where books are so dangerous that they're burned. And it's so important to remember stories that people become the books they love. They memorize them so that even if the books are destroyed, the books live on. And that book hugely impacted me. And I started to think about that. And I was able to write this young adult book about a girl who kind of writes her way back to life after a huge trauma. So, you know, for me, Ray Bradbury, he's kind of always there for me. I always feel like he's kind of like my literary father.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I was a big science fiction gal for,
Me too.
forever and ever and ever. So I know everyone wants to know this, so I'm just going to ask it. All of these wonderful Owens women, where are you in this universe? Are you one of them? Are you part of some of them? Who do you identify with the most?
Well, you know, the thing is, I really think, and I don't know if you feel this, but I really feel like a novel is like a dream. And they always say in a dream, you are every character, including the cat and the dog.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm every character. Do you feel that when you're writing a novel?
I guess we have to be, don't we? I mean, because, you know, it's never actually us. There are characters, I guess, for me that make more choices that I would make, and characters that make choices that I wouldn't make.
Yeah.
Probably is the big distinction.
Yeah. Well, for me, you know, when the book started all these years ago, there's two sisters, Sally and Jillian's kind of the wild child, which I think I was once. And Sally was kind of the motherly person who wants everything to be normal. She doesn't want magic. She doesn't want to be extraordinary. I think I really related to Sally the most. But as time has gone by, I now relate to Franny, who's the elderly aunt. And who seems kind of like she can be mean and she can be, you know, difficult, but she has a very huge heart. It's just hidden. And, you know, I feel the most like her, but I also feel very attached to Vincent, who is a brother of
Right.
Franny, who I completely didn't expect. He just like, what? Do you ever have this where like characters just walk into a scene and that's it? They take over?
You know, not to be about me, but I wrote for 2 years on The Four Winds before the main character ever walked on. And when she did, I had to throw away everything to rewrite. So yes, sometimes it takes quite a character. And I will say Vincent is quite a character.
He really is. And I just kind of fell in love with him, and he just walked in like fully formed. He was who he was. And that's so lucky when you're writing, you know, to have that happen. And it happened to me with the whole series in a way where it just felt like a gift. You know, it just wasn't that I did tons of revisions, and yet it just felt like a struggle.
It's so interesting because it reads like that. It really does. I mean, you know, sometimes sometimes, you know, some are hard, some are easier, you know, I mean, you never know, but this one does feel so seamless. And one of the things that I really particularly loved about it, and this makes me think of it because of Vincent, is that this novel takes place in a lot of places. And I get the sense as the reader, I don't know this about you at all, but it feels like you're going to all of your favorite places.
Well, that's true.
Is it?
It is. I went to all my favorite places.
It just shines through. I mean, your love for these parts of Paris and parts of London, and, you know, and it just really shows how much you love these areas. And, you know, some of them we know and some of them we don't as readers.
Yeah, I think, you know, part of it is, you know, writing the book was kind of like a joy for me. And so it was like, it was fun for me to go to all these places that I love so much.
Yeah.
And I, to know the street where certain characters live and to have been on walking on that street. And I just felt, more connected to it.
So did you know the ending when you started?
Well, I thought I did, but I actually wound up throwing out the last 100 pages and rewriting it and rewriting it. I thought I knew the ending, but I think the ending that I have now is the right ending. I feel like I had to keep writing it to get to the correct ending.
Interesting. So without giving anything away.
I know. Wouldn't you love to?
I know, it's so hard. I don't want to do any spoilers, but like, writers always want to know, like, how did you know something was wrong? So you've got these 100 pages, you've made it to the end, so it's obviously an ending to the story. And yet at some point, something inside of you says, I can do better, or, what was that feeling?
It's usually not me, it's usually my agent. Really, and I trust her. I trust her completely. And the thing is, when she says these things to me, Alice, I hate to say this, but blah, 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 I always feel like, oh my God, she's right.
Mm-hmm.
I have this sinking feeling like, oh no, she's right. I mean, if she wasn't right, I wouldn't change it.
Right.
But sometimes I think, I don't know if this is true for you, but there's a certain point where I need someone else's eyes on it because I'm so attached to it. And I will cut it to shreds, but I can't see that I need to do that.
Do you have people reading along the way?
I have people reading along the way, but to some extent they will give me that kind of feedback, but really the major feedback is from my agent and then from my editor, of course.
Right.
And I feel really lucky in who I work with. And, I think if you couldn't trust those people, then probably shouldn't be working with them. And that's, I think also as a writer, you probably feel this way too. You cannot listen to everyone because everyone will tell you something else. You have to decide whose voice you're going to listen to.
That's absolutely true. So you've got to pick, the smartest people you can.
Yep.
You have to work with them long enough to know whether you can trust them. And I think most importantly, you have to look for people who will lovingly tell you the last 100 pages don't work. Yeah. Because it's very easy to get to certainly your level and have nobody ever tell you what's wrong. And I'm always suspicious of writers who say, yeah, nobody made me edit, at any stage along the way. I just wonder, wow, what a genius.
Well, I just had a conversation yesterday with my editor, Mary Surucci, and where she told me, I hate to tell you this, and I'm like, oh no, that's the part I love the most. But sometimes you just have to get rid of things. Yep. Because even if you like the writing of it or that particular scene, when you write a novel, it has to all be going in the same direction. If it's a short story, I think it's a different situation. But with a novel, like if it doesn't work to forward the novel, then there's kind of like no point in it being there. And
the readers always can tell. They figure it out sooner or later. I will say too, to your editor, fabulous covers. I just think this is stunning.
Thanks. I know I am involved with covers because I really think it's so important. Yeah. I'm into book covers. Hi.
Hello, Julie. We missed you.
I know. Did you have any more? We have so many questions coming in, and I hope I didn't cut you off, Kristin. But
no.
We got tons of questions coming in, and a couple of them, since we're on the subject of the editor and agent, a couple of them were about that, which is, Alice, do you still have the same agent from the beginning? And then the second part of that question from another person is, if your agent and editor have contradictory things, who do you listen to?
Well, actually, that has never happened with the contradictory things. So I don't know what I would do. I'd have to split myself in two. It's weird because I just had a dream about my agent last night. My agent, Elaine Markson, I was with her until she died.
Right.
And we were together, I think it might have been 40 years because I was with her since the time I was 20-ish, 20. And I was really lucky. She was kind of like a mother, a second mother to me. I felt like she always had my best interest at heart, and I was just incredibly lucky. And then when she died, my film agent was at ICM, Ron Bernstein, and he introduced me to Binky Urban. And I'm incredibly lucky. She's amazing. And, I just feel like it makes a huge difference. A huge difference.
Because those are such, I don't think people realize those are really personal relationships that you have with your agent and your editor. It's, they're in your head, they're in your life, it's a big deal.
And I think, if I have so many friends who have gone to an agent and they've rewritten, and then they decide not to take the book, and then they go somewhere else and they've rewritten. And, it can be really a difficult situation for some people.
Yeah. There's lots of questions. Everybody will get to as many as we can. I just want to make a comment though, and there are some for you too, Kristin. So we've got some good questions coming in. I just want to be on a beach in Hawaii with both of you. I'll just say that right off the bat.
Really
I can't think of a better thing than Mai Tais on the beach with both of you two ladies.
It's really fun.
I bet. Okay, so Kylie has a question for you, Allison. This is kind of like asking who your favorite child is. So it's going to be probably a difficult, but I'll preface it with that. Who's your favorite Owens family member? And you kind of answered it a little bit, but you might have a little different take on it.
I think I have to say, I think it's Vincent. I just feel very connected to him, and I'm surprised to say it, but that's the person that I feel closest to.
Yeah, and it's interesting that he came in, after the practical, but like you said, and so it's
he has a lot of fans, I have to say.
He does, yeah. And when you all were talking about like women in history, you have a lot of male fans who are fans of your work, both of you, of your work too. And I think that's really
great.
Yeah, I think that's, and when you're talking about that, it's like all I could think of saying was like, yeah, it's called history for a reason, right? We need to call it herstory. So Allison has a question. She says it's so great to be here. She wants to know if you could share any parts of your new books that you had to edit out, any deleted scenes that you might have wished you would have put back in, or anything that you want to share with that.
I have one that I think I'm going to put somewhere because, but it may wind up someplace in a different book. There was one scene that I had to take out, which I don't feel free to talk about, but which really, it just kind of killed me to take it out. But I often have that happen.
Right. But it's so maybe a spark for another story somewhere.
Yeah.
Janine has a question. And this I always love too. She wants to know, Alice, please tell us about your interest in magic and where that evolved from. And I think don't you have a magic library?
I do. I have a magic library.
Can you think of I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. Kristin, can you think of a better place to be than in Alice's magic library?
Just thinking that.
I don't even remember where I've gotten some of these books, but they're just great and extremely helpful to me. But also, I think it's just what we were talking about. I think it's from the books that I read as a kid. And I always gravitated towards books about magic, fantasy, science fiction, and, things were more genreized then. And Ray Bradbury, I read Edward Eager like a maniac as a child. I just loved his magic books. And I think, and Shirley Jackson, I loved her writing. I feel like, books are magic and words are magic and stories are magic. So that's what I think influenced me towards writing about magic.
But do you have like spell books that you refer to like come up with some of your spells?
I do.
I know. I love that. I love that. I just think that.
Cool. I actually wondered about that when I was reading, like when Franny put salt on her shoes, like, do you just make that stuff up, or does this come from research to some extent?
Most of it comes from research, although I try to never do anything that could actually do anything dangerous, because I know when they did the film, they used somebody else's spells, and they had two people attempt. One person broke into someone's house. I don't know if it was Tom Cruise or Johnny Depp, and tried to do some kind of low spell. And one person did try to kill their husband. And I don't want anyone, I never put anything that could actually harm anybody. but all of my, all of that magic comes from, original magic.
Yes. Oh.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, the movie, I mean, we're talking about the movie for a little bit because I mean, didn't somebody have a kitchen made from the movie set, like in real life?
The people who did that film also did design houses and apartments. But I have to say, I walked into that kitchen. It was on a set in Hollywood. And I just thought, this is the most beautiful kitchen I've ever been in. That kitchen is just a killer kitchen.
It really is. And speaking of the magic, I mean, like the greenhouse, the magic books. I mean, I imagine this library.
That design team was amazing.
I just watched it the other night. It's always whenever it scrolls through on the TV, it's like you stop and you go, because like you said, it's a cult classic. It's just like, it doesn't matter when it's on. It's just like,
yeah, it really is.
And it holds up. It really holds up.
There's so many great women in it. That was Sandra Bullock who really decided to make it, and she got everybody, and she really influenced everything.
Yeah. Did you ever meet Stevie Nicks, who wrote the song with Sheryl Crow?
No, I never did.
Oh,
I
always wondered that, because you guys two have that kind of magical thing going. I think you guys somehow we need to get the two of you together. Okay, Kristin, this one's for you. How did you get interested in writing historical fiction?
Well, really, it's the offshoot of what Alice and I were talking about earlier. I had spent, 15 years probably writing women's contemporary fiction. And I was really interested in those days in, women's lives, women's ordinary lives, and the way we, form relationships and deal with our, parents, our children, all of that sort of stuff. And I think as I got older, and my son moved off and I was empty nest, and I just sort of began having this sense that there were too many women's stories that weren't being told. And for whatever reason, that led me to look into World War II Russia, which is Winter Garden. And the first time I sort of tried that, because I thought, I can't just write historical fiction. You have to be a historian or something. But sometimes a story, like The Nightingale, or maybe you felt that with Dove Keepers, sometimes you just dive in because the story feels so important and you're willing to just dive in because it's important. And that's how I guess I got started.
Yeah, it's, and thank goodness you did.
Yes, very happy.
We're all happy that you did. Okay, this one's from Lindy. Alice, do you mourn the characters and the end of the book like your readers do when you're done? Like she's going to mourn the end of this Practical Magic series. The grief is real, she says.
I think I was mourning the whole time I was writing it. I mean, it was very hard for me. And I cried a lot while writing. And, I hadn't felt that. I felt that way when I wrote my first book. I really mourned those characters when I was finished with them, but I really do. But I feel like these characters are kind of with me. So I don't feel like I've lost anything really.
Right. Because there is something that, yeah, it's sort of like the movie. It's like everything, like these are real people that are just kind of with us.
That's how I,
yeah. They're sort of over our shoulders. This one can actually be for both of you because it's so we're going to start with you, Alice, first on this one. This is from Joshua. He's so excited to join fourth event with you. He asked this question because of the gorgeous poetic and lyrical quality of your writing. I'm curious what music you were listening to or listened to while crafting the last bits of magic.
Thank you. That's a really good question. I usually listen to like one artist or one album. Do you still call them albums? I don't know. Or one artist while I'm writing a book. And sometimes I forget who that person is, but I certainly did not forget who this person was because I listened to Taylor Swift when I was writing this. And I just think her last two albums were so lyrical and almost trance-like. And I feel like when I listen to the same music over and over again, it almost has like a hypnotic effect. So that's who I've been listening to lately.
How about you, Kristin? Do you listen to music when you write?
No.
Nope.
I don't need quiet. I don't need any of that. I just like sort of go into the zone, but I'm very interested. So do you just have it playing like in speakers quietly behind you on a loop?
Just over and over again until I'm not really hearing it. I'm more like feeling it.
Right. Well, that's
Okay.
interesting. Was it
So it's not
folklore?
really like interfering.
Folklore.
Yeah.
This is for both of you too. So speaking of the writing process, it's from Tiffany. Kristin, we'll start with you first on this one. What's your perfect writing spot? And what do you need to have by your side while you write?
Ooh.
I mean, one of the things that I love about writing is the fact that I can do it anywhere. And this is why I still write longhand on yellow legal pads.
What?
Yes, yes. So I wrote half of The Four Winds sitting in a lawn chair on the beach in Kauai. I write on my back deck. I write next to my fireplace. I write wherever I feel like writing that day. And as to what now that I do historical fiction, I need piles and piles and piles of research around me. But other than that, I'm not, I don't need candles or tea or, any of those sorts of stuff. I just am very job-like. I sit down, I write, and then I'm done for the day.
Alice, isn't that amazing that she writes in longhand on legal
I can't
pads,
believe
right?
that. I wouldn't be able to read my own handwriting. It would be a problem for me.
Hard, yeah.
Well, for
How
me,
about you? How about you, Allison?
I tend to write in bed, I have to say, which is terrible for your posture and your back. But I tend to write in bed. Interesting for me that when I started Practical Magic, I wrote it in Wellfleet, Massachusetts, out on the Cape in a shed on the marsh. And I finished this book in Wellfleet in a house that I rented that was on a marsh. And I felt like I began and ended kind of in the same place.
All right, we got a couple more questions that we'll try to get to here. Well, this is for both of you. So Alice, we'll start with you. Given your profession, who are your favorite authors and how do you find time to read?
I don't find that much time to read, and that's sad for me because I used to be a huge reader, and I always feel like reading is great, but writing's even better. I mean, it serves kind of the same purpose, but more so. But, this year, one of the books that I read that I just fell in love with was Matt Haig's Midnight Library. I really needed that book. And it was my first experience of when I finished it, I contacted him. And I understood that urge. I just said, I just loved your book. It just helped. I was so depressed. It just helped me so much. It's such a wonderful book. So that was kind of my favorite book this year.
How about you, Kristin?
Well, Matt's great. I loved his stuff. I read a lot, and I'm constantly reading people that I haven't read before. Oftentimes sort of people looking for quotes or endorsements. This year, I have not had as many sweep me away books, honestly, as usual. I'm still waiting for some of those. I haven't read some of the big books of the year. I particularly loved this year a book called We Begin at the End. I think you and I talked about that, Julia. Yep. I just that's probably the one, and I think William Kent Kruger's Lightning Strike. I really loved that this year. So, but there's a lot more. Favorite authors are endless.
Yeah, I know it is. That's another favorite kind of question. It's hard to answer that one sometimes. Okay, if you haven't, okay, I have to this Kristin, you guys, this is my favorite.
Oh, I haven't even heard of that.
Oh my goodness. Beneficence by Meredith Hall. Okay.
Trade original.
Yeah, no, it wasn't hardcover. It's from Godine though. That's a small publisher. Writing's amazing. So anyways, that was one of my lift up the authors, lift up the new authors. Okay, so Alice, somebody's asking about the soap. I have a crush on the soap. Do you make it?
No, I don't know how to make it. I don't know how to do any of the things my characters know. But I would like that soap. It was interesting with that soap is that, that soap has always been in the novels, but I realized when I was writing about it in the 17th century, that the reason they made the soap was because it was antibacterial. It was during and after the plague. And one of the reasons that women healers were so much more effective than, male physicians was because they washed their hands, which is so interesting, for us right now, who are all washing our hands all the time.
Right.
It's so interesting. I have to say, Alice, when something like that you put in the book without knowing why you put it in the book ends up, that's part of the magic of this process, where it can be, hundreds of pages later will you go, oh, that's why it was soap. I just find that process magic.
I think it is.
It really is. And I think that that's the thing that I was talking to a debut novelist the other day who was being interviewed and by somebody else. And this is kind of a question for both of you too, because when a book goes out in the world that you both put out in the world, and then your readers will glob onto something that's in it, like the soap or like something that you've put in there. What's that feeling like, where it's like you've created this and then other people are pulling out what they think is like that interesting fact? Kristin, do you have that? Have you ever had that where it's like, oh, that was interesting?
Well, to me, what's one of the most interesting things about this whole process is you spend all of this time and psychic energy and love and passion writing these books, getting to know these characters, trying to make them, sentence for sentence as flawless as you can. And they become what they are in your head. They're not necessarily what the book actually is, because they change over time. Your vision changes over time. And so the book becomes something slightly different than you imagine. And out it goes into the world. And then it belongs to the readers. And then it's theirs to reshape and to infuse with their emotions and their stories and their feelings, and it becomes something else yet again. And they're constantly seeing things in my books that, if they were intentional, it was deeply subconscious, So I just love, I guess I love that interactive part of the art where things become more than.
Right. How about you, Alice? Is it the same thing?
I totally agree with Kristin. I mean, what it is it's when you're the reader, you're doing half the work or more than half the work, because you're imagining everything. That's the great thing about reading. That's the difference between reading and any other kind of art form, is that it takes two to experience it, the writer and the reader, and it's kind of equal.
Right.
Yeah.
And he said it was kind of off-putting because he had written this one part, and that this interviewer, because it was a very personal part of the book, and this interviewer came to him and was like, well, what about this? He's like, oh yeah, this is, other people are knowing this now. This is out in the world. This isn't mine anymore. It's somebody else's to experience. That has to be kind of a cool feeling with when you're writing, that it's just like, it's yours, but it's not yours.
Yeah, I don't think you think about it because you're the writer in this instance. I think you just think about it when you're the reader and you're kind of creating the world that somebody else really brought to life.
Yeah. Another question for you, Alice, on this one is, and I know these are always hard to answer, but it's the movie question. And is there anything in the works on any more of the Magic series coming to any place?
Yes, actually, Denise Denovi, who was the producer of Practical Magic, has the rights to the Rules of Magic and Magic Lessons, and we're hoping that it's going to be a series. So, with those three first books, yeah.
Very good, very good. And I know that this is always a hard one for both of you too, because first of all, we're on launch day of this. So I'll start with Kristin first on this question. What are you working on next for us?
Well, it's interesting because I heard you, Alice, you said something about 9/11, and I actually experienced for the first time in my career real trouble writing during the pandemic. I mean, I've written through cancer and everything that you can write through, and the pandemic sort of brought me to a halt. So I am a year behind. I am now working on a book that I am in love with, perhaps because nobody has actually read it except for me, so it's currently perfect. But it's another, strong woman and women at an unusual time in American history.
Ooh, I like, so a little mystery on what that
Well,
mysterious
I don't know,
time is.
Julie. It could be about anything. Let's see,
I love it. I love it. That's the thing, is that it's it has to be something that you're interested in too, though. I would imagine that it's like that keeps you wanting to discuss, to keep going with it. Sort of your point, Alice, about not being reading that much, but writing is your reading. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I found the opposite, Kristin. I've been writing so much because I have nothing else to do. I'm either walking my dog, watching Netflix, or writing. So, I finished much faster than I thought I would finish. I've been working on a book for a couple of years. I kind of go back and forth between books, so it's hard for me to even say how long I've worked on it. And now I have to do a revision, but I don't feel like I can talk about it too much. I always feel like that's kind of a jinx, but it's biblical, and it was a lot of research. And I always feel every time I do that, I'm never doing this again. How much work.
It is.
Well, that's a thing when you write historicals, I think, because the readers are out there and they're going to call you on stuff if it's, if you miss that one little, you'll hear about it all through. But before social media, it probably was a little bit better. Social media now is probably taking that into a whole different world.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, ladies, we are out of time.
Oh.
I know. I wish you were here. We'd be going out to dinner after this.
Going out to dinner. And I have to, Kristin, thank you so much for being here with me tonight. And Julie, I love you and I love Warbricks. And this has been such a great pub date for me. Thank you both so much.
Pub day. I can't believe we were so lucky. Thank you, Alice. Thank you for your words. Kristin, thank you for your words. You entertain us to the nth degree. I cherish you both. And everybody,
see you in Hawaii.
Guys, back in Hawaii.
Bye, everybody.